We all love a good revenge story. After all, such stories are all over classical and pop culture. From Homer's Iliad and Shakespeare's Hamlet to Marvel's The Punisher and even video games like The Last of Us Part 2. There are even stories where the protagonist goes on to murder dozens of people over his dead dog, and rightly so. Revenge is fascinating, maybe morbidly so. It also has something very puzzling about it. People seem to crave revenge, but following this desire often leaves behind a trail of pain. So let us take a closer look at revenge in this episode. You might think that revenge is simply about getting back at people, but it's actually more complicated. Revenge is not just about inflicting pain, it's about sending a message. Let me explain. Let us first better understand what revenge is. Philosophers and psychologists have been working on this topic for quite a while, and revenge, as well as its cousin retribution, have been in the focus of punishment theories, which is where my own expertise lies. To get a better idea of what revenge is, let us start by distinguishing it from retribution. Retribution seems to be simple on the surface. It is about giving the offender the punishment they deserve, period. It doesn't matter if the punishment can deter, rehabilitate, or have any other good effects. The punishment is in itself morally justified. Also, the punishment has to be proportional to the severity of the wrongdoing. Lastly, an authorized institution has to inflict the punishment. And that's already about it. In contrast to retribution, revenge is typically said to be personal. It is often also excessive. It's not about justice, it's about payback. And it is often done by the victim themselves. Now that I've told you these differences, let's sort of ignore them. I will draw a bit from research in psychology later, and psychologists don't often distinguish retribution from revenge. Sometimes both will be lumped in together, but it's worth remembering the potential differences from a philosophical perspective. So, do we like revenge stories that much because we can identify with them? Do they scratch a deep-rooted itch? You might think that the answer is quite obvious. If we didn't like revenge, we wouldn't have all these different types of media shoving it into our faces. Case closed. No hour-long video essay on YouTube necessary. But the video is not done yet, so you can already imagine that I'll say it's complicated. Let me give you the story arc for this video. I will now present some evidence for our appetite for revenge. Then I will give you what we can call the paradox of revenge. And lastly, I'll try to solve that paradox. When researchers want to show us that people crave revenge, they like to point to the brain. A famous study that is frequently quoted as evidence for our urge to take revenge comes from Dominique de Carvin and colleagues, where participants were made to play a version of the trust game. Both player A and player B had 10 monetary units, and A was able to give their MUs to B. In that case, the MU would be quadrupled. Now B could decide whether they wanted to give some of it back to A or keep all of it themselves. Obviously, giving half of it back to A would be the fair decision to make. If B kept all of it, we would expect A to have a desire for revenge to get back at B for the unfair behavior. In the study, if B chose to keep the money, player A had 1 minute to decide whether they wanted to exact revenge and reduce B's total payoff or do nothing. The researchers were especially interested in the brain activity during that 1 minute period. What they found is that the reward processing areas of the brain were more active in the participants that planned to exact revenge. So the best guess is that participants who planned to take revenge expected this to be pleasurable to them. There is more research that suggests that people are very much inclined to take revenge, or rather to punish people who behave in immoral ways. The problem is that it is quite difficult to say whether we specifically care about revenge in these cases. Remember that revenge and retribution are specifically about punishing without regard for future consequences. But maybe our general impulse to want to punish is motivated by other concerns than revenge. And to show you that indeed other considerations do play a role, let me turn to the paradox of revenge. In the last 2 decades, researchers were actually quite confident in saying that lay people's punishment decisions are mainly driven by a retributive desire. The psychologist Kevin Carl-Smith and his colleagues were paramount for these findings, but then with one study they found something that surprised them. In their study, participants again played trust games where they were screwed over by other participants who did not cooperate with them. They were then grouped in punishers, who could choose to punish the wrongdoer, non-punishers, and forecasters, who were only asked to imagine how they would feel if they had the chance to punish the unfair behavior. The surprising result? People in the punishment condition actually felt worse afterwards than those who did not punish, even though in the forecaster condition, people expected that punishment would help them feel less frustrated about the wrongdoing. This is weird. If it really was true that people care about punishment for punishment's sake alone, that is, retribution or revenge, why would they be more annoyed than if they hadn't punished in the first place? We've got a problem to solve, and fear not, researchers are coming back to the rescue. In newer studies, psychologists went after this mystery and set out to solve it. What we know currently is that people indeed expect revenge to be sweet, but that they appear to be wrong about this expectation. This is not entirely surprising, as people often have a hard time to correctly gauge which decisions will actually satisfy them. So what actually gives satisfaction when people take revenge? Researchers aim to find out by dividing participants in studies into different conditions. Those who had the chance to punish without getting any feedback from the offender, and those where the offender replied to the punishment of the participant. They again found that simply punishing alone didn't leave people much happier, but those who received a message from the offender acknowledging the wrongdoing and promising to change their behavior in the future were significantly more happy with the outcome. And that's not really surprising when you think about it. We don't only want people to suffer, but we want them to understand why they suffer. So it seems like revenge and punishment are not about simply getting back at others, but also about sending a message, about making people understand, make them acknowledge their wrongdoing. These insights into the communicative importance of revenge and punishment also made their way into current theories of the justification of punishment. Not only does punishment aim to communicate with offenders, that's the whole point why punishment should be exacted in criminal law. Punishment has the aim of making clear to the offender why what they did was wrong and get them to see the reasons and respond to them adequately. I didn't talk much about the moral justification of revenge, but this also presupposes a better understanding of the phenomenon. Now that we have that, maybe a better discussion of the ethics of revenge is possible. Let me know in the comments if you'd be interested in that. Please leave a like and consider subscribing if you enjoyed the video.